Sometimes, the stranger you beg for help is the one destiny has been waiting to introduce. Claire Bennett had never imagined that the hardest words she would ever say would be spoken to a man whose name she didn't even know. Rain poured over downtown Boston in heavy sheets, turning the sidewalks into shimmering rivers beneath the golden glow of old street lamps. Her white dress clung to her arms, damp from the storm, while her trembling hands tightened around a small overnight bag that held everything she still called her own. Behind her, music drifted from the grand ballroom of the Hawthorne estate, where guests laughed, crystal glasses chimed, and a wedding rehearsal continued without its unwilling bride. Claire's father had already promised her future to a wealthy businessman nearly twice her age, insisting it was the only way to save the family's collapsing finances. No one had asked what she wanted. No one had noticed the fear hidden behind her polite smile. She hurried through the rain, searching desperately for a taxi, but the empty street offered nothing except silence and the distant rumble of thunder. Then she saw him. A tall man stood alone beneath the entrance of an old stone building across the street, untouched by the rain, as though the storm itself refused to cross an invisible line around him. His black overcoat rested perfectly over broad shoulders, and his pale face remained calm despite the freezing wind. There was something timeless about him, something impossible to explain. People walking nearby instinctively stepped around him without realizing why. Claire hesitated. Every instinct told her to keep moving. Yet something deeper whispered that this stranger was her last chance. She crossed the street, her soaked shoes splashing through shallow puddles until she stood before him, breathing hard. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. His silver-gray eyes studied her quietly, not with judgment, but with unsettling patience, as though he had seen thousands of desperate faces before hers. Claire swallowed the knot in her throat. "I know this sounds crazy," she whispered, struggling to steady her voice. "But would you pretend to be my husband for just one night?" The words hung between them with the weight of a confession. She expected confusion, maybe laughter, perhaps a polite refusal before he walked away forever. Instead, the stranger simply looked toward the brightly lit mansion across the street, where elegant guests continued arriving beneath rows of glowing chandeliers. His expression never changed. "One night," he repeated softly, almost as if testing the meaning of the words against memories far older than she could imagine. Claire nodded quickly. "If I go back alone, they'll force me into a marriage I don't want. If they believe I'm already married, even temporarily, they'll have to stop tonight. Tomorrow I'll disappear. You'll never have to see me again." The wind carried her final sentence into the darkness. The stranger remained silent for another long moment before removing a pair of black leather gloves with slow, deliberate movements. His hands were cool, impossibly steady, untouched by the cold rain surrounding them. "You are asking a great deal from someone you've never met," he said in a calm voice that carried quiet authority rather than arrogance. Claire lowered her eyes. "I know. I'm sorry. I don't have anyone else." Something flickered across his face, so brief she almost imagined it. Not pity, recognition, as though her honesty had awakened a memory buried beneath centuries of silence. Finally, he extended his hand. "Very well," he said. "For tonight, I will stand beside you." Claire released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding and accepted his hand, surprised by how gentle his grip felt despite the quiet strength beneath it. Together they turned toward the glowing mansion, unaware that dozens of unseen eyes watched from distant rooftops, their expressions filled not with curiosity, but with disbelief, because the man walking calmly beside the frightened young woman was not merely a stranger. He was the one ruler whose appearance alone could make kingdoms bow, and before the night ended, the promise Claire believed would last only a few hours would change both of their destinies forever. Claire could still feel the cool certainty of the stranger's hand as they crossed the rain-soaked street together toward the glowing mansion. The closer they came, the louder the music became, yet an unusual silence seemed to follow the man beside her, as though the storm itself had lowered its voice in his presence. The enormous oak doors opened before they reached the entrance, and a line of elegantly dressed guests turned almost at the same moment. Claire immediately recognized familiar faces from her father's business circle, neighbors she had known since childhood, and relatives who had watched her grow up. Every smile she received carried more curiosity than kindness. Her father stepped forward first, relief flashing across his face until his eyes settled on the stranger standing calmly beside her. The relief vanished instantly. "Claire," he said through a forced smile, "where have you been? Everyone has been waiting." Claire drew a slow breath, remembering why she had returned. "I am sorry," she answered quietly. "There has been a change of plans." Her father frowned. "And who exactly is this gentleman?" Before Claire could invent a believable answer, the stranger spoke with effortless composure. "My name is Adrian." Nothing more. No family name. No explanation. Yet the confidence in his voice carried enough weight that no one interrupted him. Claire noticed several guests exchange puzzled glances. They had expected apologies or excuses, not quiet certainty. Across the ballroom, the man she had been expected to marry approached with measured steps. Nathaniel Crawford looked immaculate in his expensive tuxedo, but disappointment hardened his expression the moment he reached them. "Claire," he said, forcing a polite laugh, "I assumed you had simply become nervous." His eyes shifted toward Adrian. Would someone care to explain this? Claire felt every heartbeat echo inside her chest. "Nathaniel," she said carefully, "I cannot marry you." Murmurs spread through the ballroom like ripples across still water. Nathaniel's confident smile faded. "You cannot simply cancel an agreement made between our families." Claire looked at Adrian for the briefest moment before gathering her courage. "I already made another choice." A stunned silence followed. Nathaniel stared at Adrian, searching his face for uncertainty, but found none. Adrian merely stood beside Claire with perfect stillness, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. It was not the confidence of a man pretending. It was the certainty of someone who had never questioned whether he belonged wherever he stood. Nathaniel laughed softly, though the sound carried little amusement. "Very well," he said. "If this is true, perhaps your husband would be willing to tell us something about himself." Every eye in the ballroom turned toward Adrian. Claire felt panic rise again. They had never discussed names, stories, or explanations. She realized how impossible this entire plan truly was. Adrian looked around the magnificent ballroom with calm gray eyes before speaking. "Tonight is not about my past," he said. "It is about her future." The words landed with unexpected force. Several older guests lowered their eyes instinctively, unable to explain why his quiet voice unsettled them. Even the musicians seemed to hesitate before continuing their performance. Claire's father stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Young man, I do not know who you think you are, but you have interrupted an arrangement worth millions of dollars." Adrian turned toward him without the slightest trace of anger. Some promises should never have been made. A cold breeze drifted through the ballroom, although every window remained closed. Candles flickered together. Crystal chandeliers shimmered softly overhead. Somewhere near the entrance, an elderly servant accidentally dropped a silver tray. The sharp sound echoed through the room. Every head turned toward the front doors as 6 men dressed in perfectly tailored black coats entered in absolute silence. Their movements were disciplined, almost ceremonial. Without acknowledging anyone else, they walked directly toward Adrian. Then, before hundreds of astonished guests, every one of them lowered to one knee with their heads bowed. The oldest among them spoke in a voice filled with unmistakable reverence. "Your Majesty, the royal guard has been searching for you all evening. The council awaits your return." The words settled over the ballroom with a silence so complete that Claire briefly wondered whether she had imagined them. "Your Majesty." The title echoed through every corner of the magnificent hall. Guests who had spent their entire lives surrounded by wealth and influence suddenly looked uncertain, as though everything they believed about power had shifted in a single heartbeat. Claire slowly turned toward Adrian. Until that moment, he had simply been a composed stranger who had chosen to help someone he did not know. Now every detail she had overlooked came rushing back. The impossible calm in the middle of the storm. The quiet authority in every sentence. The way people instinctively moved aside without realizing why. Even the rain had seemed unwilling to touch him. Her heartbeat quickened. "Your Majesty?" she whispered, almost afraid of the answer. Adrian looked at her before acknowledging the men still kneeling before him. There was no surprise in his expression, only quiet acceptance. "Rise," he said gently. The 6 guards stood at once with flawless discipline, never lifting their eyes above his shoulders. Claire noticed something that unsettled her even more than the title itself. None of them appeared frightened. They were devoted. Their loyalty came from respect that had clearly been earned over countless years. Murmurs spread across the ballroom. Someone dropped another glass. A woman near the orchestra quietly stepped backward as though distance alone could make sense of what she had witnessed. Nathaniel's confident posture disappeared. "This cannot be possible," he murmured. "The Vampire King is only a legend." One of the guards finally looked toward him. "Legends do not stand before you," he answered calmly. "Kings do." Claire's father took an uncertain step backward. The color drained from his face as memories of old family stories surfaced, stories dismissed for generations as folklore told to children during winter nights. Tales of an ancient kingdom hidden beyond ordinary sight. Tales of a ruler whose word carried the force of law even among creatures older than history itself. He had never expected those stories to walk through his front door wearing a black overcoat. Claire could barely breathe. "Why did you not tell me?" she asked softly. Adrian met her eyes with surprising warmth. "Because you asked a stranger for kindness, not a king for permission." The answer left her speechless. She realized that if she had known who he truly was, she never would have approached him. Fear would have stolen the courage that desperation had given her. Across the ballroom, Nathaniel slowly recovered enough to speak. "If you truly are a king, then surely you have no reason to interfere in human affairs." Adrian's expression remained composed. "I did not interfere," he replied. "She asked for my help. I accepted." Nathaniel opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. Every guest understood the difference. Claire had chosen freely. No one had forced the meeting. No one had commanded the decision. At that moment, another figure entered through the grand doors. Unlike the guards, he wore a deep crimson suit with a silver crest pinned over his heart. His hair had turned completely white with age, yet his posture remained perfectly straight. He approached Adrian with measured steps before offering a respectful bow. "Your Majesty," the older man said, "the royal council has already learned that you revealed yourself in public." Adrian remained silent. The advisor continued carefully. "They are requesting your immediate return. They believe this human woman presents an unforeseen complication." Claire instinctively lowered her eyes. She suddenly felt painfully aware that she did not belong in this extraordinary world. She had only wanted one peaceful night, yet somehow she had become the center of a conversation involving kings, royal guards, and an ancient council she had never known existed. Before uncertainty could consume her completely, Adrian stepped beside her. His voice remained calm, but every word carried unmistakable certainty. "Claire Bennett is under my protection," he declared. "No council will speak of her as though she is merely a complication." The declaration lingered in the air long after Adrian finished speaking. No one in the ballroom seemed willing to breathe too loudly, as though even the smallest sound might disturb the invisible balance that had suddenly settled over the room. Claire stared at him in disbelief. "Under my protection." The words carried a warmth she had not expected and a responsibility she did not understand. She had known this extraordinary man for less than an hour, yet he had spoken with the certainty of someone making a promise that could never be withdrawn. The elderly advisor remained respectfully still, though concern briefly crossed his face. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "the council does not question your compassion. They question the consequences." Adrian's silver-gray eyes remained fixed on Claire for another quiet moment before turning toward the advisor. "Compassion without action is only decoration," he replied. "I have no interest in decoration." The answer silenced every objection before it could be spoken. Claire's father finally found his voice. "This is absurd," he insisted, though his confidence had almost completely disappeared. "My daughter belongs with her family." Adrian regarded him calmly. "Does she?" The simple question struck the room with greater force than an accusation. No one answered. Claire lowered her eyes as memories surfaced one after another. Years of expectations. Years of decisions made for her. Years of being told that sacrifice was the price of being a good daughter. For the first time in her life, someone had asked a question no one else had bothered to consider. Did she truly belong where everyone insisted she did? Nathaniel stepped forward, determined not to surrender what he believed was slipping away. "You have only heard her side of the story," he said. "She is frightened. Tomorrow she will realize this is a mistake." Adrian's expression never changed. Then tomorrow she may choose differently. Nathaniel frowned. You would simply let her walk away? Choice has value only when it remains free, Adrian answered. Anything less is ownership, not devotion. Several guests exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who had quietly supported the arranged marriage found themselves unable to challenge his words. Claire slowly looked up at him. There was no demand hidden in his voice. No expectation. No condition. He had offered protection without asking for obedience in return. That realization unsettled her almost as much as his true identity. The advisor took another measured step forward. There is another matter, Your Majesty. Adrian nodded for him to continue. The council has already learned that you publicly declared this woman under royal protection before witnesses. The advisor paused briefly, choosing each word with great care. According to the oldest articles preserved within the royal archives, such a declaration carries legal significance if it is witnessed by both humans and vampires. Claire blinked in confusion. Legal significance, she repeated quietly. The advisor looked at her with surprising kindness. The law was written centuries ago to prevent rulers from making promises they did not intend to keep. Once spoken publicly, certain royal declarations cannot simply be withdrawn. Claire felt the room tilt beneath her feet. She turned immediately toward Adrian. You knew that? Adrian remained silent for a moment. Then he answered with complete honesty. I suspected the possibility. And you still said it? She whispered. Yes. There was no hesitation, no regret, only calm certainty. The advisor lowered his voice. By sunrise, the royal council will almost certainly demand a formal hearing. They will want to determine whether the ancient covenant has been awakened. The words meant nothing to Claire, yet the expressions surrounding her changed immediately. The royal guards became noticeably more alert. Nathaniel slowly stepped backward. Even Claire's father looked genuinely unsettled for the first time that evening. Claire looked from one face to another before returning her gaze to Adrian. What is the ancient covenant? She asked softly. Adrian's eyes met hers with quiet honesty. If the council is correct, he said, then the promise I made tonight may have changed far more than either of us intended. No one spoke after Adrian's final words. The silence felt older than the mansion itself, as though invisible history had quietly entered the ballroom and taken its place among the guests. Claire searched Adrian's face, hoping to find some sign that this misunderstanding could still be undone. Instead, she found only calm resolve. He had not spoken carelessly. Every sentence he had offered since stepping into her life had been deliberate. The elderly advisor folded his hands respectfully before him. Your Majesty, the council will not ignore this matter. The covenant has remained dormant for generations. Most believed it would never awaken again. Claire looked between them. Someone has to explain what is happening, she said softly. I cannot understand rules that no one has told me about. Adrian nodded. You deserve the truth. He guided her toward one of the quiet corners of the ballroom, away from the growing crowd of anxious whispers. The royal guards formed a respectful distance, allowing them privacy without abandoning their duty. The music had stopped entirely now. Hundreds of guests remained where they stood, too fascinated to leave and too uncertain to interrupt. Adrian looked through one of the tall windows where rain continued to fall across the gardens. Long before human kingdoms drew their first borders, he began. Our ancestors created laws to prevent kings from ruling by impulse. Among those laws was a covenant. If a vampire king publicly offered his protection to one person before witnesses from both worlds, that promise became sacred until it was examined by the royal council. Claire listened carefully. So the council can simply cancel it? Adrian slowly shook his head. They can investigate it. They cannot erase words that were spoken with honest intent. Claire lowered her eyes. But your intention was only to help me. Adrian answered without hesitation. Yes. Then why is everyone so afraid? Adrian remained silent for a brief moment before speaking again. Because the covenant does not measure only intention. It also recognizes destiny. The word lingered in Claire's thoughts. Destiny had always sounded like something found in old novels or forgotten fairy tales, not in the middle of a Boston ballroom surrounded by familiar faces. The advisor approached slowly once more. Your Majesty, if I may. Adrian nodded. The older man turned respectfully toward Claire. There has only been one recorded occasion when the covenant reached its final stage. Claire felt a chill despite the warmth inside the mansion. What happened? The advisor smiled faintly. History does not remember the ceremony. It remembers the peace that followed. The king chose someone no one expected. The council objected. Time proved him right. Claire absorbed every word while trying to separate impossible legends from the reality unfolding around her. Nathaniel watched from across the ballroom, unable to hide his frustration. Claire noticed him speaking quietly with her father, both men glancing repeatedly toward Adrian and the royal guards. Their expressions carried confusion rather than anger now. Wealth, influence, and carefully arranged plans had suddenly become meaningless beside authority that neither of them could challenge. Claire turned back to Adrian. What happens now? Adrian answered honestly. The council will summon us before sunrise. Us? She repeated. You are part of this now. Claire looked away toward the ring. Only a few hours earlier her greatest fear had been an unwanted marriage. Now ancient laws and forgotten kingdoms had become part of her future. She almost laughed at the impossibility of it all. I only asked you to help me for one evening, she whispered. Adrian's expression softened with quiet understanding. I know. Claire finally met his eyes again. Do you regret saying yes? For the first time since they met, a faint smile appeared on his pale face. It was small, genuine, and unexpectedly warm. No, he answered. Because the moment you asked for help, you did not seek power, wealth, or privilege. You sought freedom. Those who still value freedom are far rarer than kings. Before Claire could answer, one of the royal guards approached and bowed respectfully. Your Majesty, he announced. The council has sent its first decree. They are already on their way here. Ignoring the murmurs filling the ballroom, Adrian calmly accepted the folded document from the royal guard. The heavy black seal pressed into dark crimson wax shimmered briefly beneath the crystal chandeliers, carrying an ancient emblem that none of the human guests recognized. Claire noticed that even the elderly advisor straightened his posture the instant the decree appeared. Whatever was written inside clearly carried enormous importance. Adrian broke the seal without haste and silently read the message. His expression remained composed, but Claire sensed a subtle change in the stillness surrounding him. It was not fear. It was calculation. When he finally lowered the parchment, the advisor asked quietly, Does the council insist upon immediate judgment? Adrian nodded once. They do. Claire stepped closer. What does it say? Adrian looked at her before answering. The council will arrive before midnight instead of waiting until sunrise. They believe the covenant has already begun responding. Claire frowned. Responding to what? Before Adrian could answer, the elderly advisor spoke with measured care. The covenant observes choices, Miss Bennet. It was created to recognize promises that come from genuine character rather than obligation. Every decision made after the declaration becomes part of its judgment. Claire blinked in confusion. You mean it is watching us? The advisor offered a gentle smile. Not in the way you imagine. Ancient laws do not possess eyes. They reveal truth through actions. Claire tried to absorb the explanation, but every answer seemed to uncover another mystery. She looked around the ballroom. The guests had resumed whispering among themselves, though none dared approach Adrian. Many quietly gathered their coats, uncertain whether they were attending a family celebration or witnessing history. Nathaniel remained near the grand staircase, his expression filled with frustration, yet even he no longer attempted to challenge Adrian directly. Claire's father approached cautiously, his voice noticeably softer than before. Claire, he said, perhaps you should come home. We can forget tonight ever happened. Claire looked at the man who had raised her. For years, she would have obeyed immediately. Tonight something felt different. She answered with quiet respect. I cannot pretend nothing happened. Her father sighed heavily. Everything has become far more complicated than you understand. Adrian answered before Claire could continue. Complicated truths are still better than comfortable lies. The older man lowered his eyes, unable to disagree. Suddenly the mansion lights flickered once. Then again, a cool breeze drifted through the ballroom despite every door remaining closed. The royal guards instinctively turned toward the entrance. The advisor quietly whispered, They have arrived sooner than expected. The massive oak doors slowly opened without anyone touching them. Instead of soldiers, 7 elegantly dressed figures entered with calm, measured steps. They appeared neither young nor old. Their formal clothing reflected different centuries rather than different fashions, as though each had carried history itself into the room. None displayed anger. None displayed warmth. They simply observed everything with remarkable patience. Every royal guard bowed respectfully. Adrian inclined his head in acknowledgement, though he did not kneel. Claire immediately understood these were the members of the royal council. The figure walking at their center possessed calm silver eyes and carried a polished wooden staff carved with unfamiliar symbols. His voice echoed gently through the silent ballroom. "King Adrian Blackwood," he said, "the council acknowledges your declaration of royal protection before witnesses of both realms." Adrian answered with equal calm. "I acknowledge it as well." The elder's gaze slowly shifted toward Claire. Instead of judgment, she found quiet curiosity in his expression. "Claire Bennett," he continued, "you entered this evening seeking only temporary refuge. Yet ancient law has unexpectedly placed your name beside the throne. Before any decision is reached, we must determine whether this meeting was coincidence, or whether destiny has quietly been waiting for both of you far longer than either of you has ever known." The council members entered the center of the ballroom with quiet dignity, and although none of them raised their voices, every conversation around them faded into silence. Claire had never witnessed authority expressed without intimidation before. These ancient figures carried no visible weapons, made no threats, and yet their presence alone transformed the atmosphere of the mansion into something timeless. The elder at their head studied Claire for several long moments, not with suspicion but with remarkable patience, as though he were searching for an answer hidden beyond appearances. "Miss Bennett," he said at last, "would you please tell us why you approached the king this evening?" Claire looked briefly toward Adrian before answering. "Because I thought he was an ordinary stranger." A faint murmur passed among the council members. The elder nodded slowly. "And had you known his identity?" Claire answered without hesitation. "I never would have asked him." Another quiet exchange of glances moved through the council. The elder continued. "Did you seek his wealth?" "No." "His title?" "No." "His influence?" Claire gently shook her head. "I did not even know any of those things existed." The elder remained silent for several seconds before turning toward Adrian. "Your Majesty, did you reveal your identity before accepting her request?" "I did not," Adrian replied calmly. "Did you accept because the covenant required it?" "No." "Did you believe she possessed some hidden importance?" Adrian's answer came just as steadily. "No. I accepted because someone asked for help without deception." The ballroom became perfectly still once again. Claire noticed the expressions of several council members subtly soften. It was as though every answer removed another layer of doubt. Nathaniel suddenly stepped forward from the gathering of guests. "Honorable Council," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "This entire situation began because she abandoned an agreement between our families. Surely that matters." The elder regarded him politely. "Does it?" Nathaniel appeared surprised by the question. "Of course it does. Was the agreement entered willingly by both parties?" Nathaniel hesitated. Claire quietly lowered her eyes. The silence itself became an answer. The elder gave a respectful nod. "Then the agreement belongs to commerce, not to destiny." Nathaniel could offer no reply. Claire's father slowly stepped forward next. Unlike Nathaniel, he looked exhausted rather than angry. "I only wanted security for my daughter," he admitted quietly. "I believed I was making the responsible choice." Claire looked at him with unexpected compassion. For the first time she realized he had been driven as much by fear as by pride. Adrian remained silent, allowing father and daughter to face one another without interference. The elder observed them carefully before speaking again. "Fear often disguises itself as wisdom," he said gently. "That is why ancient laws value free choice above convenient arrangements." Suddenly, one of the younger council members closed his eyes briefly, as though listening to something no one else could hear. When he opened them again, surprise crossed his face. He turned toward the elder and whispered a few quiet words. The elder's calm expression changed almost imperceptibly. He looked directly at Claire once more. "Miss Bennett," he asked softly, "have you ever been given an unusual family heirloom? Something passed down through generations whose purpose no one could explain?" Claire blinked in surprise. "Actually, yes." Every member of the council immediately became attentive. Claire reached beneath the neckline of her dress and carefully drew out a delicate silver pendant that had rested unseen against her heart since childhood. It was no larger than a $50, shaped like a small crescent moon surrounding a single clear stone. My grandmother told me never to lose it, Claire said quietly. She said it had belonged to our family for longer than anyone could remember. The instant the pendant caught the light, the carved staff held by the elder emitted a faint silver glow. No one moved. Adrian looked at the pendant with unmistakable recognition, while the elder slowly exhaled as though an answer hidden for centuries had finally revealed itself. So, the elder whispered with quiet amazement, the covenant did not awaken tonight because of chance. It awakened because it finally found what it has been waiting for all along. The faint silver light surrounding Claire's pendant slowly faded, but the silence it created remained. Every pair of eyes in the ballroom rested upon the small heirloom resting in the palm of her hand. It no longer appeared to be an ordinary family keepsake. Even Claire noticed details she had somehow overlooked for years. Delicate symbols surrounded the clear stone, almost invisible beneath the polished silver, as though they had only now decided to reveal themselves. She looked at Adrian, searching for answers. His expression held neither surprise nor fear. Instead, it reflected the quiet recognition of someone who had just uncovered a forgotten page of history. The elder council member stepped forward carefully. May I examine the pendant? Claire hesitated only briefly before placing it into his waiting hands. The elder studied it beneath the chandelier's light, tracing the ancient markings with one fingertip. Remarkable, he whispered. It has remained dormant within a human family for centuries. Another council member approached, his calm voice carrying respectful curiosity. The Royal Archives described this symbol as belonging to the House of Dawn, the ancient family entrusted with preserving balance between our world and humanity. Claire frowned. The House of Dawn? I have never heard those words before. The elder returned the pendant to her with surprising gentleness. Most people have not. Time has a way of hiding even the greatest stories. Claire carefully closed her fingers around the silver charm. My grandmother never mentioned any of this. She only told me to keep it close because one day someone would recognize it. Adrian quietly smiled. It seems she was wiser than she realized. The elder slowly nodded. Or perhaps she understood more than she chose to reveal. Nathaniel could no longer hide his frustration. This proves nothing, he said firmly. It is simply an old necklace. Surely an ancient kingdom cannot base its decisions on a family heirloom. None of the council members reacted with offense. Instead, the elder looked toward one of his companions, who quietly removed a small leather-bound volume from inside his coat. The book appeared older than any object Claire had ever seen. Its pages had darkened with age, yet every corner remained perfectly preserved. The council member carefully opened the volume before stopping at an illustrated page. Without speaking, he turned it toward Claire. She immediately froze. The same crescent-shaped pendant had been drawn there with astonishing precision. Even the tiny symbols matched perfectly. Beneath the illustration appeared a single sentence written in elegant script. The elder translated it aloud. When the guardian's heir returns bearing the crescent seal, the covenant shall awaken before the throne chooses its future. The ballroom fell silent once more. Claire struggled to process what she had just heard. Are you saying this was waiting for me? The elder answered carefully. Not for you alone. He looked toward Adrian. For both of you. Adrian folded his hands calmly behind his back. Then destiny has arranged an unusual meeting. Perhaps, the elder replied. Or perhaps destiny merely opened a door. What happens after that still belongs to choice. Claire appreciated those words more than anyone realized. Throughout the evening, she had feared that invisible forces were deciding her future without asking her permission. Hearing that choice still mattered allowed her to breathe a little easier. Suddenly, another royal guard entered the ballroom with unusual urgency. He approached Adrian, bowed respectfully, and spoke in a low voice that nevertheless carried across the silent room. Your Majesty, we have received unexpected news from the northern border. Adrian's expression sharpened slightly. Report. Several noble houses have learned that the covenant has awakened. Some have already begun traveling toward the capital. The elder council member slowly closed the ancient book. Then we have less time than expected. Claire looked around the room in confusion. Why would they come because of me? The elder's answer was calm, but unmistakably serious. Because the moment the covenant awakened, Every ancient family realized the throne may soon welcome a queen they never anticipated, and not all of them will greet that possibility with the same hope. Claire stood motionless as the elder's final words settled over the silent ballroom. She had arrived at the Hawthorne estate believing the night would determine whether she could escape a life someone else had planned for her. Instead, she now faced a future connected to an ancient kingdom she had never known existed. The silver pendant rested warmly against her palm, no longer feeling like an ordinary heirloom, but like a bridge between two worlds that had quietly waited for this moment across countless generations. The council members exchanged thoughtful glances before the elder stepped toward Adrian. "Your Majesty," he said, "the noble houses will soon arrive expecting answers. They will question the covenant. They will question the human before them. Most of all, they will question your judgment." Adrian met his gaze without hesitation. "Then they may question me directly." A faint smile appeared on the elder's face. "That is precisely the answer I expected." Claire looked at Adrian, still struggling to understand why a king whose name inspired such respect would place himself between her and every challenge that continued to appear. "You do not even know me," she said quietly. Adrian turned toward her with the same calm expression she had first seen beneath the rain. "I know enough." Claire shook her head gently. "You know that I was frightened." "Yes." "You know that I asked a stranger for help." "Yes." "But you do not know who I will become." Adrian's eyes reflected quiet certainty rather than blind confidence. "Neither do you. That is why the future deserves the chance to unfold instead of being decided by fear." His words lingered within her. For the first time that evening, Claire realized she was no longer thinking about escape. She was thinking about possibility. Her father slowly approached, his shoulders carrying a weariness she had never noticed before. "Claire," he said softly, "I spent years believing that protecting you meant making every difficult decision on your behalf. Tonight I finally understand that I forgot to ask what kind of life you wanted." Claire looked at him with gentle eyes. "I know you wanted what you believed was best." He nodded sadly. "But believing is not always understanding." Without another word, he stepped back, allowing her to choose her own path for the first time. Nathaniel remained silent near the grand staircase. The determination that had once filled his expression had quietly disappeared, replaced by reluctant acceptance that some things could not be controlled through status or carefully negotiated agreements. The elder council member raised his carved staff once more. The silver symbols upon its surface glowed briefly before fading into a warm, steady light. "The council has reached its first judgment," he announced. Every eye turned toward him. The covenant was awakened through free choice, honest intention, and mutual respect. Therefore it shall remain in effect. A quiet breath escaped Claire. The elder continued. "However, the future remains unwritten. No law, ancient or modern, may force two hearts to walk the same road. The covenant may open a door, but only trust may carry someone across its threshold." Adrian inclined his head respectfully. "Wisely spoken." The elder smiled. "Then allow history to continue writing itself." Outside, the storm that had covered the city throughout the evening slowly came to an end. The rain softened into a gentle mist, and the first rays of moonlight broke through the clouds, filling the ballroom with pale, silver light. Claire looked toward the windows before turning back to Adrian. Hours earlier, she had asked an unknown man to pretend to be her husband for a single night. Neither of them could have imagined that one simple request would awaken forgotten promises, reunite ancient histories, and offer both a future built not upon obligation, but upon choice. Adrian extended his hand once again, not as a command, not as a royal decree, but as an invitation. Claire smiled softly before placing her hand in his. Around them, no one applauded. No grand announcement followed. There was only quiet understanding that sometimes the greatest kingdoms are not built through power alone, but through kindness freely given when it is needed most, and even the oldest crown shines brightest beside a heart that has chosen compassion over fear.